colleagues. Dear colleagues, dear students, ladies and gentlemen from Cyprus and abroad, good evening. I welcome you all to the fourth hybrid lecture of our 61st public lecture series of the Archaeological Research Unit. Tonight, we have the honor and great pleasure to welcome in our lecture hall a very good friend, Professor Elena Walter-Karydi, professor from the University of Saarbrücken, Germany, who was also a visiting professor at our department in 2001. Dear Lela, thank you very much for accepting Professor Yorgos Papasavas' and our invitation to share tonight one of your most recent studies. Before doing so, let me briefly introduce you to our audience. Elena Walter-Karydi has studied archaeology at the University of Athens, and already before graduating, she has assisted the legendary Byzantinologist Manolis Hatzidakis at the Benaki Museum. Her decision by that time to follow classical archaeology instead of Byzantine history led her to adventurous paths in archaeology and life. Athens, Munich, Salzburg, Aegina, Samos, Naxos, Salzburg, Saarbrücken, and Nicosia are the main fields of her career and life. Her first steps in the field brought her to the German excavations at Keramaikos under Dieter Oli and to Nikolaos Kondoleon's excavations on Naxos Island before continuing her studies in classical archaeology, ancient Greek philology, and ancient history at the University of Munich with the scholarship of the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung. In Munich, she has worked at the Bayern Academy of Sciences and published her first monograph on Corpus Vasorum Antiquorum of the Archaeological Museum Munich. She got married to Professor Hans Walter, the founder of the Institute of Classical Archaeology in Salzburg, Austria, and has cooperated with him for 25 years at the excavations of the Bayern Academy of Sciences at the Apollo Sanctuary at Colonna on Aegina. Meanwhile, she has worked for her PhD at the German excavations at the other Colonna, at the Heraion of Samos, becoming a pioneer in the study of Samian archaic pottery and the local pottery workshops in East Greek world in 1970. She has also worked in the excavations of Gruben at the Apollo Sanctuary on Naxos and published the geometric pottery of the site. Elena Walter-Karydi continued with another extensive monograph, her habilitation at the University of Saarbrücken about Aeginetan School of Sculpture, published in 1983. She has taught at the universities of Salzburg and Saarbrücken, and as I mentioned before, also at the University of Cyprus. The monographs cited above were followed by the two last volumes of the Aegina excavations, co-editing with Hans Walter. In 1989, she was elected as a founding member of the series Corpus Vasorum Antiquorum of the Academy of Athens, and since then she is cooperating and editing this series. Since 1974, she is corresponding member of the German Archaeological Institute at Athens. Since 1976, a member of the Archaeological Society at Athens, while in 2009, she became a honorary doctor at the University of Athens. The monographs and countless articles of Professor Walter-Karydi demonstrate the focus of her research in the stylistic and thematic peculiarity of local workshops, particularly in the geometric and archaic era, such as geometric pottery in the Cyclades, East Greek pottery, archaic and early classical sculpture on Aegina, the Cyclades, the Peloponnese, and Epirus. Further topics refer to the use of color in ancient Greek art, archaic inscriptions on Attic vases, the emergence of figures and phenomena in ancient Greek art, for example, the word chros for color, the basis of sculptures, the exegenismos of oikos, in late classical period, the decoration of grotesque, etc. In tonight's lectures, Professor Walter-Karydi will speak about Lapide pingere on the materiality of late classical and Hellenistic mosaics. Before giving the floor to Lella for delivering her lecture, I would like to inform our guests, our online guests, that we will keep their microphones and cameras off during the presentation. But you can activate them for participating in the discussion by raising your hand in the Zoom for asking questions directly to our speaker. Comments and questions are also welcome in the chat. Dear Lella, please proceed to the podium of the Archaeological Research Unit.
Oh. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be again here. But let us go to the mosaics. Floor mosaics for the Greek houses were created most probably in Athens in the late 5th century BC in connection with a new type of house which might be called noble. In this, the inner core became right-angled, colonnaded. It was the first time that columns, a decidedly noble architectural element, appeared in houses, but nevertheless only in the inside. Moreover, the main rooms had wall decorations, ceiling decorations, and floor mosaics. Later, marble sculptures appeared as well. A well-preserved example of the so-called House of the Mosaics in Eretria. No, that is right. Μπορεί να πάει και αριστερά ή είναι μόνο ένα. Α, είναι μόνο ένα.
Μπορείτε να πατήσετε το επόμενο και το επόμενο για να φανεί.
Ναι.
Α, ωραία.
Ωραία.
Μια χαρά.
Well, it is not right, but it will come. The so-called House of the Mosaics in Eretria, about 370. Πρέπει να πάμε. Τέλος πάντων. There is a peristyle court, a second one without columns, as well as floor mosaics, and remnants of the wall decorations in the andrones, where the master of the house and his male friends held their symposia. Although noble houses, the so-called noble houses, were usually larger than the far more numerous simple ones, it is not size per se, but these traits which distinguished this new residential architecture. Such houses must have originated in Athens, since they seem to reflect a new way of life, which was characteristic for a part of the Athenian society. That is, in these years, some high-class Athenians preferred, instead of frequenting the agora, to stay often at home, not only feasting in their andrones, but also discussing various fundamental issues with like-minded friends. Whether this new way of life was likewise valued or not in the other cities where noble houses appeared, such houses did soon spread over the wall of Greece and farther afield to the east, south, and west on the wall of the Mediterranean. The wall decorations, as for instance, a late Hellenistic one from Athens we see here, were a colored and modeled stucco work that both hid the cheap building material and imitated the isodomic ashlar masonry of monumental architecture in order to ennoble the room where these wall decorations were in. Consequently, large paintings, whether figured scenes or ornamental fields, did not appear on the walls, same as they did not on their prototypes. Only small ones were sometimes inserted into the narrow string cores. For instance, the theatrical scenes on the right, in a house in Delos, which has been accordingly named by the French excavators Maison des Comédiens. The houses in Delos belong to the second half of the second century up to the early first century BC, and I won't give in the following a more exact date for the mosaics, the Delian mosaics mentioned. As regards the ceiling decorations, although of all ancient architectural decorations we know the least about ceilings, we do know from literary mentions that there must have been ceiling decorations already in the earliest Athenian noble houses. For instance, in the Wasps of Aristophanes, the uncouth Velikleon is told by his son, who tries to teach him good manners, what to do in order to look elegant in a symposium. He tells me he must stretch out elegantly on a kline and look at the ceiling decorations and at the room curtains in order to give the impression of a connoisseur, in which attitude Velikleon later fails miserably. As the wasps were first performed in Athens in 422 BC, these verses suggest that in these years there existed ceiling decorations in the Athenian noble houses. Moreover, Plato mentions that someone in the Politia, that someone is looking at ceiling decorations, and further, a certain Theophilos, a master craftsman of the middle 3rd century BC, refers in a letter of his to the vaulted ceiling of an andron with 7 kline he is going to decorate in the house of one Diotimos in the area of Fayum in Egypt. It was a time where noble houses were all over the Mediterranean. It has been possible to reconstruct some ceiling decorations from houses in Delos. In them, next. Εγώ είμαι. In them there appear no figured scenes, only stripes of decorative motifs. It seems that the ceiling decoration never took a leading role in the iconography of the Hellenistic noble houses. It was probably even less effective than the string course scenes of the wall decorations. The leading role in this iconography was undertaken, strange though this might seem, by the floor mosaics. While the wall decorations were an imitation of the ashlar masonry of monumental architecture, the floor mosaics were a new idea altogether. Since natural river pebbles were already used as a flooring material in Greece, when the wish arose to have images on the floor of the noble houses, main rooms, these self-same pebbles were used. The mosaic masters set them into a layer of fine plaster over one of coarser plaster and created with them light-colored figures and ornaments against a dark background. Such floors had the same practical advantages as the simple pebble floors, being watertight and easy to wash, yet now it was their images that were important. This light on dark coloring is found, for instance, in the mosaic fragment from Athens. Under the parliament in Athens has been found a couple of years ago, with the image of a griffin attacking a deer. It's part of a rectangular field that seems to have been the doormat at the threshold of a room. The mosaic masters packed the pebbles as close as possible in order to hide the background and give the impression of a more or less level surface. They did this because from the very beginning, they strove to create images with the character of paintings. They wished to paint with stone, lapide, pingere, as Pliny put it. Accordingly, their main concern was to overcome the discontinuity of the material they used, namely pebbles, which were inescapably of many different shapes. Moreover, in their ambition to paint, the mosaic masters soon introduced colors. While the mosaic from Athens we see shows the early light on dark coloring, in those of the Andron in the house of mosaics, this is one from it is not. This is also almost without color, about 370 from the Peloponnese. I must go on the right. Always on the right. Yes, this is the House of Mosaics in Eretria. There appear other colors, red and yellow. Later mosaics may show also blue, green, and other colors. By the way, colors and indeed polychromy were certainly ubiquitous in ancient Greek art since the middle 7th century BC. But of course, it was above all in painting that colors had the most dominant role. And just as the peristyle court contributed to the new nobility of the houses, so too did the polychromy of the wall decorations, the ceiling decorations, and above all, the floor mosaics ennoble their main rooms. Nevertheless, polychromy, we must say that, did not change the fundamental principle in Greek art that colors in themselves did not carry a significant value. A color iconography, as in the art of later periods, for instance in the Middle Ages, did not exist in Greek art. The wall decorations in the noble houses were kept as near as possible to their prototypes in the public buildings' walls, and therefore showed no large paintings. In the mosaics, there was no such restrictions, since these were conceived from the outset for the floor. There existed neither wall nor vault mosaics in the Hellenistic houses. The floor offered, obviously, space enough for large images, whether of figure, scenes, or field ornaments, and thus it was the mosaics which represented most effectively the iconography of the Hellenistic noble houses. Through the mosaics, the floor was, as it were, upgraded. There appeared rich ornamental fields as well as figured scenes. In this, the themes are often mythical, and even Olympian gods appear by no means rarely. To represent Jesus, the Holy Virgin, or even saints on the floor would be inconceivable in a Christian house. Obviously, in the ancient noble houses, man did not hesitate to treat on divine figures. Among the gods, it is above all Dionysos who occurs most frequently in mosaics, as the god of wine, of the symposium, but also of the joie de vivre in general. Moreover, since he is also the god of the theatre, there appear very often theatrical masks and even sometimes scenes from theatrical pieces. This precedence of Dionysos applies also to the small string course scenes of the wall decorations. We have seen in the Maison de Comédien theatrical scenes, but yet the large mosaic images on the floor had, of course, much more impact. What the mosaics and the wall decorations of a house, in spite of the crucial difference between them, do have in common is that in their themes they both show hardly a personal reference to the owner of the house or his family. By the way, colors and indeed polychromy were certainly this is in the decoration of the house, a hierarchy of space was observed. At first, wall and ceiling decorations, as well as floor mosaics, adorned only the andron, where the men were. Later, mosaics appeared also in the peristyle courtyards, in exedre, open recesses, as well as in upper floor rooms. It is noteworthy, by the way, that although floor mosaics occurred also in sanctuaries, temples, and public buildings, about 80% of the Hellenistic mosaics have been found in houses. In contrast to the wall decorations, the mosaic's connection to architecture consisted only in their corresponding more or less to the form of the room they were in. Thus, they were mostly rectangular, seldom circular. The theme of the image on the doormat was, as a rule, independent from that of the main part. For instance, in the andron of we see here of the House of Mosaics, there appears at the doormat and a reed we see there on the left, riding on a hippocamp and carrying a lance for Achilles, who after the death of Patroclus decides to enter again the fight against the Trojans. This Homeric scene has nothing to do with the sphinxes against griffins and the animal fights. No, with the sphinxes versus panthers in the anteroom and the mosaics with the arimasps battling against griffins and the animal fights of the andron mosaics. They are independent from each other. Besides, it is worth noting that while the figures of the anteroom and doormat mosaics are orientated towards the persons entering the andron, those in the andron mosaics are turned another way, so that the men reclining on the kline along the walls could enjoy looking at the mosaic images while drinking. Since the discontinuity in the mosaics was a strong disadvantage in the mosaic images when compared to the evenness of paintings, the mosaicists, in their constant struggle against it, had to think of new techniques. A very successful one was the so-called opus tessellatum, in which cubes of stone, tessere, took the place of pebbles. These tessere were expressly so cut that they could be better adjusted to each other than was ever possible with the natural pebbles, and thus a certain modulation of coloring, which in painting was produced by the mixing of colors, could be realized. Moreover, tessere of glass or faience contributed to brilliance effects. Even ceramic tessere were used, and the stone tessere were sometimes painted over. Another new technique which worked even more effectively against the discontinuity of material was the so-called opus vermiculatum, consisting of tiny tessere, less than 5, sometimes only 1 millimeter square, and such mosaics reached the greatest technically possible affinity to painting. As the opus vermiculatum was, of course, the most expensive technique, it was as a rule reserved for the central part of a mosaic. It was made in the atelier on a tray or slab and then inserted into this part as an emblem in set picture, while the rest of the mosaic was usually in opus tessellatum. These techniques did not appear in the mosaics of the West before the end of the 2nd century BC, and they must have been imported there from the Greek world, where probably they had been invented. Nevertheless, pebble mosaics were further on produced. One found at Rhodes with a good quality image of a winged triton may have been created in the early 3rd century, but its master has dispensed with colors, reverting to the earliest coloring of white on black, as on the Athenian mosaic we have already seen. All in all, a variety of technical means is characteristic for the Hellenistic mosaics. Philippe Bruneau distinguished 6 categories of technique in the mosaics of Delos. Delos is, of course, where we have the most late Hellenistic mosaics were found, of about 130 to 88 BC. Natural pebbles were still used, as well as tile or pottery fragments, chips, splinters of marble, tessere, and other materials scattered or forming patterns in the plaster surface. Of course, the mosaics of the highest quality were made in opus tessellatum and above all in opus vermiculatum. A superb example in opus vermiculatum is a mosaic from the royal quarter in Alexandria, perhaps from a bath, we don't know exactly, in the palace. A dog sitting near an overturned bronze vase in a squash. The dog appears in a round field with stone lions on the border, gargoyles as it were. Here the master, using minimal tessere of brown, grey, white, and some red, rendered admirably the plastic quality of the body of the dog, as well as the texture of its coat and the alert expression of its eyes. In such images, the wish of the mosaic masters to paint with stones, lapide pingere, seems to come true. The variety of techniques in the Hellenistic mosaics, which techniques could, moreover, appear together, be combined together in one and the same piece, makes the dating of them often difficult. Yet the fact that there is no neat evolutionary sequence of techniques to be found in them reveals above all the constant struggle of the mosaic masters to exploit or even combine various technical possibilities in order to achieve the effect of a painting. That was always their goal. Let us now go back in time and look at some masterly pebble mosaics of the 4th century BC. It's no wonder that in Pella, the capital of the mighty Macedonian kingdoms, there were spacious houses with pebble mosaics of outstanding quality, like the so-called Dionysos house with 2 peristyle court here, a reconstruction. This house is named after the god on such a mosaic. This is also from this house. And the mosaic. A young naked Dionysos riding, or rather sitting with sovereign ease on a springing panther, the god is holding his thyrsus and clasps with the right hand the neck of the animal. Another masterpiece from this house shows a lion hunt. On the figure of Dionysos, stripes of grey pebbles render a modeling darkness. That is, you see it, that is a shading with no contrasting light, a shading which suggests the plasticity of a body or the folds of a garment. In painting, the modeling darkness must have been invented already in the earlier 5th century BC, as the archaic coloring in which no colors are diluted or intensified is left behind. There are no paintings in the preserved of the years when the modeling darkness appeared, but Attic white ground vase images give a certain idea of it. For instance, this noble figure of Hera holding her scepter on a cup, Attic white ground cup of about 470 BC. Henceforth, the modeling darkness remained effective in painting. It occurs, for instance, in a wall painting of about 330 BC in the so-called Persephone tomb in Vergina. For instance, in the scene of Pluto abducting Persephone, well known. In the mosaics, the effect of modeling darkness tallies with the way this is used in paintings, depending, of course, on the mosaic's quality. For instance, in a centaur broccoli, in a centaur proudly holding a killed hare, a pebble mosaic of the early 3rd century BC from Rhodes, which does not reach the high quality of the Pella mosaics, we see the modeling darkness is rudimentary. On the Dionysos figure, oh no, piso. On the Dionysos figure, fine strips of lead strengthen some outlines or render some details. These details may also be rendered with fine lines of lead, the eyebrows with clay stripes, the hair curls with clay and lead stripes, the ivy wreath with round green painted artificial stones. Such attempts to enrich the technique as well as the coloring of pebble mosaics might have paved the way to the creation of the opus tessellatum and opus vermiculatum we already saw, which also speaks for both of these techniques having been conceived in the Greek world. In painting, an important invention after the middle of the 4th century BC was the depiction of the ground surface. A famous example is the wall painting of Τι γίνεται με αυτό? Δεν θέλω πίσω, θέλω μπροστά. Αυτό είναι, εντάξει. A famous example is the wall painting on the facade of Philip II tomb in Vergina of about 336 BC, as seen in the copy made right after its discovery. Represented is a lion hunt of King Philip, his son Alexander, and their companions, among other hunters, and everything takes place on a hilly ground with trees and rocks. The depiction of the ground surface was taken up at once in a simplified form by the mosaicists. For instance, in the lion hunt from Pella we just saw, as well as in the stag hunt, a masterly pebble mosaic from the so-called House of Helena, Helena's abduction, a rich mansion in Pella, named after the subject of another high-quality mosaic in this house. The stag hunt mosaic is signed by Gnosis. His name is the oldest known of a mosaicist, and it is a pity no other work of this great master is known. The modeling darkness on the body and the cloaks of the hunters, as well as on the bodies of the animals, is excellent. Like the master of the Dionysos mosaic, Gnosis used some artificial stones, yellow and red ones for the hair of the hunters, small black ones for the eyes and the eyebrows, red for the tongue of the stag and the lips of the hunters, etc. In the Dionysos mosaic, the master dispensed, its master, we don't know the name, dispensed with representing the ground where the two rear feet of the panther should rest, apparently in order to convey the impression that the god is flying. In the course of time, the image of Dionysos in the mosaics is transformed. For instance, in an emblem in Opus Vermiculatum from the peristyle court of the so-called House of the Mask in Delos, the god appears sitting on a tiger, zoologically not quite correctly rendered this animal, the god holding the thyrsus and a cymbal. He is fully and elaboratedly clothed with a much more striking coloring than it appears now. It is a little, the colors are not very well preserved, and his long-sleeved chiton reminds of actors' costumes, as if the god of the theater wishes to appear like an actor himself. Compared with the late classical Dionysos we saw, this late Hellenistic one is impressive in a new, effusive way. Even the animal's wildness is intensified. That in this mosaic, the god is framed by centaurs, these as less important figures do not appear in opus vermiculatum but in opus tessellatum, confirms his heightened power in the Hellenistic times. Even creatures like the centaurs, who in older images had never anything to do with him, now follow him. One of them even holds a crater, a symposium vase that looks quite incongruous in his hands. In a mosaic, in opus vermiculatum from the Maison de Dionysos in Delos, another Maison de Dionysos, Dionysos has wings, a fantastic feature that is not motivated by any religious belief, but serves only to exalt his appearance. He's riding a leopard with fantastic features again, the head of a tiger, the mane of a lion, and the god is holding his thyrsus. His cantharos, lying overturned, hints at the delights of drunkenness. By the by, this cantharos, you see it on the right, shows masterly highlights, splendor, as Pliny called them. After mentioning the invention of light and shade in painting, Pliny added, later was added splendor, something distinct from light. Highlights were invented in Greek painting shortly after the middle of the 4th century. They appear only on figures and serve to enliven the forms, as, for instance, in the painting. Τι γίνεται εδώ. Δεν προχωρεί. Ναι, in the painting of the marble throne in the Eurydice tomb in Vergina of about 340 BC. Here, the painting, Hades and Persephone appear standing on a frontal 4-horse chariot. The highlights are best preserved on the brown horse on the left part of this scene. The mosaic masters adopted the highlights from paintings soon afterwards. Let us conclude our review of images of Dionysos in Hellenistic mosaics with one from the Casa del Fauno in Pompeii. Here, a childish Eros dares to appear more or less in the guise of Dionysos. Late Hellenistic childish Erotes seem to be up for anything. This one, ivy-wreathed, like the god, is having for fun, riding a tiger with the head of a leopard and the mane of a lion. In these two, he imitates the god, who rides not only wild animals, but even hybrid wild ones. This Eros Dionysos, in his eagerness to drink from a katharos, has even thrown the thyrsus of the god on the ground so that he may hold the vase with the one hand and the reins with the other. Indirectly present is Dionysos in a mosaic in opus tessellatum, after which the house in Delos is called the House of the Dolphins. There appear circular friezes of ornament as well as one of lion and griffin heads, while in its four corners, childish erotes as tiny winged figures in short tunics are riding on dolphins. Each eros is holding a dervish, which reveals to whom he is connected. The Thyrsus of Dionysos, we see it on the right, the trident of Poseidon, the caduceus of Hermes, and perhaps the club of Heracles. This is not well preserved. The Erotes parody a contest that took place in Rome involving single jockeys, acrobats, so-called pisaltores, and pairs of horses. Every acrobat had to spring from the one horse to the other, while these were at full gallop. In the Delian mosaic, this contest takes place with pairs of dolphins instead of horses and erotes instead of acrobats. That the theme of an event in Rome appears in a Delian mosaic is not surprising, since many Italian merchants resided on this island. Nor need we ask why erotes take part in an acrobatic contest as a representative of gods, since these late Hellenistic childish erotes may indeed appear, as I said, in every possible situation. The winner is to be identified as the one riding the dolphin with a victory crown on its mouth on the right. Since he is the one holding the Thyrsus, thus proclaiming his connection with Dionysos, it is the god who is actually the victor. This outstanding mosaic is signed, which happens rarely. Moreover, while in the mosaic from Pella we saw Gnosis signs simply with his name, Gnosis has made me, in the Delian mosaic, the master makes also his origin known, as Clepiades from Aradus has made me or it. Aradus is a city in Phoenicia, yet the mosaic is purely Greek in style, as is the name of the master and the language of the signature. Since Dionysos was also the god of the theater, theatrical masks are a very frequent theme in the mosaics. Masks occur entwined in a network of fruits, wreaths, and flowers in the garlands surrounding a scene. We have shown it. No, here we see them of the childish Eros Dionysos. Such a garland may also appear alone. Here we have it. Maybe the only subject of the. No, here is again a garland with such masks, and a mask which is the only subject of a mosaic, a very impressive mask of the old slaves from Rhodes, an emblem in opus vermiculatum, the most difficult opus, of extraordinary quality. The highlights on this face are masterly. The characterization of the old man makes almost a portrait out of this mask. There appear also wall theatrical scenes in the mosaics, as they do in the wall decorations, but they are very small. Of excellent quality are those on two emblems. both signed by the Samian Dioskouridis. He was not an isolated case of a gifted master from this island. In Samos had been found Hellenistic mosaics of excellent quality. These emblems stood on the opposite sides of a white mosaic floor in the so-called Villa of Cicero in Pompeii. And in this emblem, actors in bright-colored clothes perform as street musicians on a narrow stage before the yellowish wall of a house. The first actor plays a tambourine, the second cymbals, and the woman a double flute. The actors were all male. For a male role, they wore a brown mask. For a female role, a white mask. The maskless boy on the left has apparently a non-speaking role. There has been found a late Roman mosaic with the same theme and with inscriptions in Lesbos. And so we know that this scene belongs in the second act of the play The Possessed, Theophorumeni, by Menander, the most famous poet of the new comedy. The second mosaic by Dioskouridis represent likewise as the inscriptions of another late Roman mosaic from the same house in Lesbos show, a scene from a comedy by Menander, the first act of The Woman at Breakfast, Synaristose. Three women sit at breakfast. On the right, a standing boy is hard to see as he does not wear a mask. He has a non-speaking role, probably a servant. Plangon, the young hostess, is, according to the known plot of a comedy, a foundling. She tells her friends, the prostitute Pythias and Pythias' mother, the old procuress Philainis, that a young man seduced her and she is pregnant. They love each other, but the young man's rich father wishes his son to marry another girl. The happy end comes about when a document is found which proves that Plangon is the legitimate daughter of a distinguished citizen. In my remarks on Hellenistic mosaics, I have insisted on the constant wish of the mosaicists to make their works look as much as possible like paintings, taking over from these as much as was technically possible, polychromy as well as new pictorial means, in order to succeed to paint with stones, lapide, pingere. Yet this did by no means result in their copying paintings. Although the mosaicists took painting as their model, in order to overcome the materiality of their own works, they did appreciate this materiality enough to develop their own technical possibilities and create a new art with a distinct character of its own. When we consider painting and mosaics, there is also something else worth mentioning. Peter Paul Rubens, in a letter of 1637 to the antiquarian Franciscus Junius, praised the diligence with which Junius, in his work De Pictura Veterum, had put together, I quote, all examples, opinions, and receipts which are widely scattered in the ancient writings about painting. End of quote. Nevertheless, Rubens warned Junius that these descriptions of lost images can, I quote, present themselves to us in imagination alone, like dreams, being sketched out only in words, they are thrice grasped at in vain as Eurydice shade by Orpheus, and often escape to disappoint us in our hope. End of quote. Everyone who has tried to reconstruct ancient Greek paintings from the written sources will naturally, ruefully agree with Rubens' verdict. Neither are copies of Greek masterpieces to be found in the Roman wall paintings of the Pompeian styles. These paintings have been proven to be unlikely to lead us to the lost Greek originals. Consequently, only some wall paintings in Macedonian tombs, as well as a few other Hellenistic finds, offer us the possibility of looking at ancient Greek paintings as such, and let us admit it, there remain essential gaps in our knowledge of this art. In contrast, when we turn to mosaics, we have to do only with originals. These, as a group, show us a late classical and Hellenistic pictorial art, not only with many high-quality examples, but also with a character of its own. This art may indeed be characterized as painting with stone, lapide pingere, but this expression reveals as well the independent achievement of the mosaic masters. At the transition to and in the beginning of the 1st century BC, a fundamental transformation in the appearance of the main rooms of the noble houses, if we might still call them thus, took place in Rome. Here I cannot discuss this central phenomenon of life and art in these years. This transformation brought about, among other things, that everything which was characteristic of Hellenistic wall decorations, namely the concept of imitating the ashlar masonry of the public buildings, as well as the combination of color and relief, was given up. And anew, the so-called second Pompeian style was created. Now, wall systems of wall paintings covered the walls of many rooms in the high-class houses and the villas. Moreover, in these systems, there soon took place an explosion of figural scenes. A comparison of Hellenistic wall decoration as the one we saw from the Maison des Comédiens with the second style wall painting in the bedroom from the villa of Fannius Sinister at Boscoreale. It's such a difference, everyone can see that. With the second, yes, there now appeared in them, so the completely new character of the walls. Here I cannot go into the birth of the second style, but it is evident that with the second style, the role of being the main field of pictorial decoration was reclaimed by the walls. The floor mosaics lost their precedence. There now appeared in them mostly modest plain black ornaments of figures on a white ground, or the simple imageless opus signinum. Nevertheless, it is not accidental that about the time when the wall paintings of the second style gained, as it were, the upper hand in the decoration of houses and villas, the mosaics, for their parts, spread out for the first time from the floor to the walls and even to the vaults of the ceiling. For instance, in a summer triclinium, a small courtyard of the Casa di Nettuno e di Amphitrite in Herculaneum. There are the two gods on the right, standing between columns on a wall mosaic, and hunting scenes on another wall. Mosaics could now occur even on columns, as on those from a garden pavilion of the so-called Villa of the Mosaic in Pompeii, of the mosaic columns in Pompeii, from the third quarter of the 1st century AD. These columns are covered with mosaics in opus tessellatum and with seashells added. To be sure, such columns appeared rarely, since as a rule, mosaics needed an architectural surface to support them. Nevertheless, this spreading out of the mosaics in the space of the house and villas shows that the mosaic masters tried hard not to be left behind, but not with great success. And even though floor mosaics with large figural images did later reappear in Roman houses and villas, indeed in great numbers, they never again regained the exclusively leading role which they had had in the decoration of the Hellenistic noble houses, since the wall paintings continued to be spread out on the walls, and the ceilings were also richly decorated. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ, Lela. Many thanks for this beautiful presentation. This very rich discussion, touching upon so many things from the classical period to Rubens. I had many things that I had never heard before, so many thanks for this. And I must say at this point, I'm not sure if it was said before, that Lela was here teaching some years ago, not too many years ago. And I don't know what took her that long to come back and be with us. But we are very glad to have you here, even if it's for one night.
Me too.
I'm sure there will be